What's the difference between hospitality and entertaining? How can we help our homes be life-giving places? Why did Pastor Ben put a fireplace in his house? Well, let's get into it. As kids, many of us wanted to spend time with our friends who had the latest toys and tech. We might not have had the best TV or the latest video game system, but at our friend's house, we could experience it. Well, kids and adults are naturally drawn toward things that are new and exciting. And friendships can begin between people who are excited about new tech and entertainment. But those friendships won't thrive long term unless they have something else to sustain them. In this lesson, I will argue that our homes can be outposts that proclaim a better story about humanity and the things that we make. We can help the people that we love thrive in a tech-saturated world that doesn't have their best interest at heart. And to help us see how this is possible, we're going to talk about one biblical practice that we desperately need to recover, and then I will share 3 better choices that we can make about technology in our homes. And finally, we will hear from Pastor Ben about some wise tech practices for our families. So to begin, if we want to thrive and help others thrive in our tech-saturated world, we must recover the biblical practice of hospitality. The New Testament is filled with commands for Christians to practice hospitality. One example is 1 Peter 3:8-9, which says, "Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling." For the first Christians, hospitality was an essential element of their lives together. They didn't have church buildings, and their worship services were often held in homes. Groups of believers across the Roman world banded together because they needed each other. Well, we live in a different time and a different culture today, but I believe that we need each other just as deeply. We have larger homes and more resources than our early church counterparts, but we tend to be less open to hosting people in our homes. For many of us, having other people in our homes is something that causes us stress and anxiety. I think part of the reason why is that we misunderstand the nature of hospitality. We mistake hospitality for entertaining people. Author Shannon Atchison describes how these things differ. She says, "The difference between entertaining and hospitality is this. Entertaining is all about their house and their home and look at me, while hospitality is about obedience to God and serving and loving on our neighbors." The goal of hospitality isn't to impress or entertain anyone. It's to serve others and show them the love of Christ. And this posture frees us from the pressure to have everything be perfect. True hospitality offers others what we have. It doesn't pretend that we are something that we're not. And any follower of Jesus can practice hospitality, married or single, homeowner or renter. All of us can offer the love of Christ to our friends and neighbors in our homes. Don't wait until you get married, have a better place, or have nicer furniture. Sharing a can of soup with somebody in your studio apartment can be an incredible experience if it is done in the love of Christ. Trust me, I'm no Martha Stewart or Joanna Gaines, but I open my door and my table almost every week because I deeply believe in the power of hospitality. Why is hospitality such a powerful practice in our lonely, tech-saturated culture? Well, our modern world trains us to value things over people. But hospitality is fundamentally a people-centered practice. Being hospitable is not about having the best TV or the most amazing food. It's about loving the human in front of us. If someone has fun at my house, that's great. But more than that, I want them to feel seen, known, and loved in my home. Calls and text messages can be encouraging, but they can't replace the handshakes and hugs that are shared when you walk through a friend's front door. True Christian community is so much better than a fancy new video game system. And I will say it again, all of us can do this, no matter what our relationship status or stage in life. You can show hospitality in a dorm room or a retirement home. In a world filled with virtual communication, our hearts long for real human connections, and our God calls us to the ministry of hospitality. Hospitality doesn't come naturally to some of us, but it is a practice that all of us can grow in. So what are some practical things we can do to make our homes life-giving spaces? How can we actively resist the relational disconnection that tech often brings in our lives? Well, here are 3 better choices that all of us can make. First, we can choose activity over passivity. So much of our entertainment today requires nothing of us other than sitting and staring. And this just isn't good for us. We sit and watch football instead of throwing around a football in the yard. God made our bodies to move, and He made our minds to be active. Now, I'm not saying that we should never relax. We need rest. God literally gave humanity 1 day a week to rest. But we need to ask ourselves, is laying on the couch and binging a show really all that restful? Do you really feel refreshed, or do you kind of feel blah afterwards? Perhaps we would actually feel better if we took a walk while we listened to that podcast. The second better choice that we can make is to choose community over isolation. God created us for activity, and He also created us for community. So much of our technology today isolates us from each other. Even if we're in the same place together, we're not interacting with each other. When I was a kid, I used to play board games and card games with my family. My dad would even sometimes read books to us. But we don't really do that anymore. It's mostly just watching movies or scrolling on our phones. Maybe you've seen that change in your family too. Well, I think we've lost something. Now, yes, it's okay to be alone. Jesus intentionally spent time away from other people. It's not wrong to be introverted. But when it comes to entertainment, I think most of us would be well served by looking for ways to include others. If you're going to watch a show, think about who you could enjoy that show with instead of doing it alone. The third better choice that we can make is to choose creation over consumption. This recalls what we talked about in our second lesson. God gave us authority to shape the world, and when we accept this calling, we are most healthy as people. God didn't make us to be consumers of content. He calls us to be creators of good things. Now, this doesn't mean that for every YouTube video we watch, we should make a YouTube video. There are endless ways that we can be creative. Baking, woodworking, storytelling, knitting, making music, and working in the yard are just a few ways that we can fulfill the creation mandate. Of course, it's always possible for our hobbies to become unhelpful obsessions. But if we are wasting a lot of time with mindless entertainment, we should think about how we can become creators rather than just consumers. Well, these are 3 choices that all of us can make in our homes. But parents, you have a powerful opportunity and responsibility to set the tone for your families. Never underestimate the power of your example to your kids. They see the choices you make. And you can also be intentional in helping your kids make better choices with tech. And to help us think about this more, I sat down with Pastor Ben.